Good, happy Monday morning, June 1st, 2020. I'm Riley King, and welcome to the RK Newscast, right here on the Riley King Network. Let's begin, where we have your U.S. news, international news, business news, and political news. First, we're going to begin this broadcast with live updates on the George Floyd protests spread nationwide. Let's take a look at those updates and get you updated on that information first. What you need to know. Protests erupt for the sixth day across the U.S. over the death of George Floyd, an unarmed black man, at the hands of a police officer in Minneapolis, Minnesota. At least 40 cities have imposed curfews, and National Guard members have been activated in 15 states and Washington, D.C. One former officer who was seen with his knee on Floyd's neck was charged with third-degree murder and manslaughter, but prosecutors say the charge isn't harsh enough and are demanding charges for the other officers involved. Here is the latest information. Thousands around the world march in solidarity with George Floyd protesters. Protesters around the world have taken to the streets this week in solidarity with those demonstrating in the U.S. against police brutality and racial inequality following the death of George Floyd at the hands of white officer in Minneapolis. In London, crowds gathered as well. Also in New Zealand, thousands gathered. In Berlin, and also in Australia. So it's not just happening in the US, it's also happening around the world as well now. Shots were fired at police at a building in Oakland, California. Here's the tweet. At 12:09 a.m., shots were fired at the Oakland Police Administration building, located at 455 7th Street. No injuries reported. Officials have detained 3 individuals in connection with this shooting and the 1900 block of San Pablo Avenue. Here are the biggest overnight developments from the nationwide George Floyd protest. Late night unrest in major cities. Protests in Washington, D.C., New York City, and Philadelphia all saw clashes between protesters and police continuing even after a curfew went into effect in D.C. and Philadelphia. There were large fires set, tear gas fired, building vandalized, and dozens arrested. National Guard on Sunday moving. National Guard members activated in 15 states and Washington, D.C. Nationwide curfew for more than 40 cities imposed. Curfews tonight in response to the ongoing protest. Atlanta City, New Jersey extended its curfew for a full week, and Cleveland, Ohio extended its curfew through Tuesday. Floyd family speak to police. Floyd's family spoke to Minneapolis police directly for the first time live on CNN. Minnesota truck driver charged a man drove a tanker truck into a crowd of protesters in Minnesota Interstate Sunday night charged with assault. And Derek, the former police officer in court who was fired with his knee on Floyd's neck, will appear in court on June 8th, court records show. He has been charged with third-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter. Washington County declares state of emergency overnight. Violence and thefts. The court appearance for the former Minnesota officer charged for murder is moved to June 8th. Boston police officers were injured during the protest last night. A number of Boston police officers were injured during a protest Sunday night, which saw 40 people arrested, said police. 7 injured officers were taken to the hospital. More were treated on scene, and at least 21 cruisers were damaged in the Boston police said in a tweet. Late Sunday night, the Massachusetts National Guard arrived in Boston to help. And that is the latest on the protest nationwide. We will be sure to keep you updated with all of the latest information. Stay with the Riley King Network for that. Reporter: Mr. President, I'm outside your house. There's nothing fake about this, said an MSNBC reporter. Let's take a look at that video right now from MSNBC.
Well, Brian, you know, if the president's watching, I'm looking at his house right now, and there's nothing fake about this. This storage facility that we've been looking at all night that's completely engulfed now, I think is the reason that the park police cleared us out here. They wanted to get fire engines down this block to try to address that. But those DCFD engines have moved on. I don't know whether it was a lack of access to water or if they didn't feel safe enough even in that situation here. And in the meantime, the park police have pushed us back yet again, including giving my photographer and I a little bit of a boost, getting out of the area here as they try to create a little bit more space. But I want to direct you to this, because this is what this is really all about. This is still peaceful protesters trying to come out here and express their anger, their frustration, their exhaustion with what has gone on in this country when it comes to police brutality and police violence. These people are trying to do this peacefully. They have been trying to self-police the folks who have been here throwing rocks and bottles and fireworks so that they can deliver this message to this exact audience, these police officers, to the man who lives in the house temporarily down the street. They're trying to make a very clear point right now. And in the face of all of this, now with most of the crowd gone, with most of the bottle throwing, the rock throwing, the pepper spraying done, they're doing exactly that.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for...
Okay, and there you go on that video from MSNBC News. Strong division in Brazil as coronavirus infections soar. Let's take a listen to that video from Sky News.
Cowboys and cowgirls cheered on as they joined the now weekly anti-lockdown rally in Brazil's capital. The numbers vary and the count is always contested, but thousands flooded into Brasilia from cities and towns hundreds of miles away. It's noisy and raucous, and it's utterly defiant. Forget social distancing, forget staying safe, in fact, forget COVID. These are the faithful supporters of President Jair Bolsonaro who pour scorn on the pandemic and is willing to ignore the crisis engulfing his country.
Well, this is remarkable, really. Brazil is having tens of thousands of new cases of COVID infections every single day. And these Bolsonaro supporters are coming out, and they simply don't care. They just simply refuse to accept that anything needs to be locked down, anything needs to be changed at all.
His supporters call him legend, and his arrival is pure theatre. Circling the crowd time and again in his helicopter, urged on from the ground. Finally, he appears outside the presidential palace to greet his adoring fans. Sounds familiar? Well, Donald Trump is his hero, and this is pure Trump. But it's not always so upbeat. He's facing allegations of misconduct in office, and Brazil is one of the worst COVID-hit countries in the world. In truth, on an ordinary day, he looks exhausted and ill. Listening, not engaging with supporters, telling him he is their saviour. These supporters now man camps in the capital. And they're from all walks of life. They don't deny COVID, but they think everything is a communist plot. That's Chinese and Brazilian communists. In fact, anyone who doesn't support Bolsonaro.
This is true. The sick is true. I believe it. Of course. I'm not stupid, but it is not this size.
We are here to support our president because our president, he's really, since the beginning, really tough, really strong. He's trying to expose the truth about COVID-19, but he's up against so many people, so many institutions that they're not interested in telling people the truth. They're interested in keep boosting the numbers up and keep people hiding at home.
Brazil is now hugely divided. Those who support the president and those staring at a nightmare spread of the COVID-19 virus. And the numbers keep rising every day. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News, Brasilia.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. And now let's take a look at your stock market. Stock features pull back as Wall Street struggles to extend May's strong gains. U.S. stock features edge lower early Monday after consecutive monthly gains. Trump praises National Guard and blames violence on architects. Let's take a listen to that video from CBS News.
Trump is blaming the violent protests on anarchists. He also wants those known as Antifa, an umbrella term for far left-leaning groups that resist white supremacists, be designated a terrorist organization. Nicole Killian is at the White House.
It's unclear how this designation, if it happens, could work since there are no domestic terrorism statutes under federal law. As protests intensified near the White House and across the country, President Trump, in a series of tweets Sunday, praised the National Guard in Minneapolis for shutting down radical left anarchists, then declared the United States of America will be designating Antifa as a terrorist organization.
The president wants to know what the FBI has been doing to surveil, to disrupt, to take down, to prosecute Antifa. And if they haven't been doing that, we need a plan right away.
In a statement, Attorney General William Barr said the violence instigated and carried out by Antifa and other similar groups in connection with rioting is domestic terrorism and will be treated accordingly. Federal law enforcement sources tell CBS News they are still investigating what role extremists may be playing and won't characterize whether they are left-wing or right-wing.
My administration will stop mob violence, and we'll stop it cold.
But some of the president's tough talk and tweets are drawing bipartisan backlash. Lawmakers criticize racially charged posts referencing the most vicious dogs and most ominous weapons. And when the looting starts, the shooting starts.
Those are not constructive tweets, without any question.
It should be a unifying force in our country and not to fuel the flame.
CBS News has learned the White House has raised the idea of the president doing a national address. The mayor of Atlanta advises he should be careful with his words.
We're well beyond the tipping point in America, and it's as my grandmother used to say, if you don't have anything good to say, sometimes you just shouldn't say anything at all.
A top advisor says whether the president speaks from the Oval Office, a White House podium, or on social media, he will continue to communicate with the American people. Steve?
Nicole, thank you.
Okay, thank you for joining us for this morning edition of the RK Newscast with your U.S. news, international news, business news, and political news. Have a great rest of your Monday, everyone. I'll see you back here later on today for another broadcast. Goodbye, everyone.